thereby approving the disbursement of the requested funds. The endorsed letter was then sent to the CBN. The CBN then disbursed these said funds as directed. But Mr. Oguma, the CBN chief, knew that using these security vote letters to take money from the CBN violated what the CBN had described as Nigeria's accepted government procedure. The proper government procedures require the Minister of Finance and the Accountant General to each approve disbursement by Nigeria's budget. The security vote withdrawals were not properly approved by both the Minister of Finance and the Accountant General, and were also not included in Nigeria's budget for the relevant fiscal years. Well, who cares what the law says? The general gets whatever the general wants, right? Well, with no concern for the plight of the Nigerian people, this family business of looting the national treasury was going great until Abacha died mysteriously, and then the house of cards came crashing to the floor. It was September 1999 when Swiss lawyer Enrico Mofuni answered a phone call that would keep him up for the next 20 years. President Olusegun Obasanjo had heard about Mofuni somehow, and the Nigerian government wanted his help as a matter of urgency. So, Obasanjo's newly installed administration sent a high-ranking government official to Geneva in Switzerland to recruit this lawyer. This government official called Mofuni in the middle of the night and asked to meet. The job was simple, at least they thought. Mofuni was tasked with getting hold of the money stolen by Abacha between 1993 and his death in 1998. To get started, the Nigerian police handed him the details of a few closed Swiss bank accounts, which appeared to be holding some of the money Abacha and his associates had stolen. According to Mofuni, a preliminary investigation published by the police in November 1998 found that more than $1.5 billion, that is 1.1 billion pounds, was stolen by Abacha and his associates. Armed with the documents showing the history of the accounts, he took the issue to the Swiss Attorney General. From here, the dance began. Mr. Mofuni successfully argued that the Abacha family and their associates formed a criminal organization. This was critical because it opened up more options for how the authorities would deal with their bank accounts. The Attorney General issued a general alert to all the banks in Switzerland, demanding that they disclose the existence of any accounts opened under the Abacha's names and alliances. Within 48 hours, 95% of the banks and other financial institutions declared what they had, which seemed to belong to the Abacha's family. This would uncover a web of bank accounts all over the world. Mr. Mofuni reportedly helped the Nigerian government in their battle to secure their Abacha loot and return the money home. But he didn't do this out of the goodness of his heart. He had agreed to a commission of 4% on the money sent back to Nigeria. Well, while finding the money was relatively easy and quick, Mr. Mofuni would soon realize that getting it back to Nigeria was not going to be that easy or quick. According to the Swiss lawyer, the Abachas were fighting like dogs. They appealed just about everything the prosecution team did. The goal was probably to delay the process for as long as possible. The family hired dozens of expensive high-class lawyers in every jurisdiction where the family and their associates were being pursued. Reports claim that more than $12 million was estimated to have gone to paying these lawyers. In the United Kingdom alone, the family allegedly spent about $8 million on the biggest of solicitors to help fight the Nigerian government. In fact, in some instances, the family reportedly tried to use blackmail on the investigators. But at the end of it all, they lost. Well, not entirely. For allegedly helping their father plunder Nigeria of an estimated $5 billion in the 90s, Mohammed and Abba Abacha and other relatives of the late dictator Sani Abacha were rewarded by the Nigerian government. According to this report, the secret deal between the government and the Abachas demanded the family to return part of the loot in exchange for perpetual immunity against prosecution. This deal, kept classified for months, was personally approved by President Goodluck Jonathan in July 2014 and jointly authored by the Attorney General Mohammed Adoke. The terms of the agreement was later obtained by Premium Times and other news outlets in the country. The base of the said agreement is for the Abacha family to cooperate with federal authorities to have the stolen funds repatriated in exchange for clemency. On receipt of the assets, Nigeria will, quote, end any and all legal proceedings and investigations against the settling parties, referring to the Abacha family. The government will again recognize properties owned by the family in Nigeria, the agreement says. Further details in the agreement reveal that the Federal Republic of Nigeria will withdraw any and all civil proceedings against the settling parties. Another clause said the federal government will end without any finding of liability or guilt any and all proceedings of whatever kind, including criminal, civil, or administrative proceedings contemplated or pending in any court in Nigeria. The government also decided to release their passports and allow them travel at will, basically ending the case against the Abacha family. The Nigerian government agreed to this secret deal as a sort of plea bargain to have the Abacha family drop its case and allow the money to be repatriated. Geneva prosecutors also closed their own in getting its share of the Abacha windfall. But what has happened with all these monies? The total amount of the looted funds recovered from this late head of state, General Sani Abacha, in the past 24 years has been put at $3.65 billion. However, there has been no clear information on how exactly the money was used by the Nigerian government. So the question is, has it been relooted? The effect of the Abacha theft on Nigeria's economy can still be felt years after his death. You see, Abacha, his allies, and top officials added a new form of corruption that killed the Nigerian economy. That is the siphoning of money used by Nigeria's oil refineries to turn crude into gasoline. More than $2 billion was reportedly diverted from Nigeria's four state-owned refineries, leading to their collapse. Nigeria started the import of refined fuels under Abacha, while he and his cronies looted the national treasury. Some reports even claim that he was leading the trade of importation of refined petroleum into the country as well. The evil of Abacha's regime can never be overstated, and every waking day in Nigeria reminds us of the cruelty of that family. Little wonder then why the name of Abacha is associated with money laundering in Nigeria. But do you really think Abacha stands alone as the worst looter in Nigeria's history, or the one who got caught? Now, I know the contradictions, the controversy, and in fact, everything about this particular character seems to come with two extremes. Some will swear Abacha is the worst thing after Tinubu. Oh, wait, hold on, scratch that. Let's not get ahead of ourselves now. While others will tell you it was all a PR campaign against him and that he looted nothing and all those monies were being saved for Nigeria, albeit in his accounts and those of his associates. I honestly can't tell you what to think, but this is the history. And then there is the strangest contradiction of Abacha's rule. In May 1997, a military coup overthrows the elected president of Sierra Leone, rebel from the RUF, that is the Revolutionary United Front, a group known for hacking off the hands and arms of civilians. They storm the capital, Freetown. Kaba escapes, he flees to Guinea and calls for help. The international community hesitates. The UN sends 50 observers. Nigeria sends 12,000 soldiers. Under Abacha, Nigeria leads ECOMOG, the West African peacekeeping force. Nigeria provides 80 to 90% of the troops, 90% of the funding, and by March 1998, Nigerian-led ECOMOG forces fight their way into Freetown and restore Kaba to power. Democracy is restored in Sierra Leone. The irony here is brutal. The man restoring democracy next door has crushed it at home. The man sending soldiers to fight rebels in Freetown has Moshood Abiola locked up in a cell. His critics said the whole thing was a PR stunt, a way for a pariah dictator to buy international legitimacy while his country was under sanctions, and there's evidence for that. Scholars have noted Abacha wanted to offset his isolation after the Ken Saro-Wiwa execution in 1995. But the Sierra Leoneans, whose democracy was restored, they didn't care about Abacha's motives. For them, Nigeria's soldiers were liberators. Abacha wasn't just a dictator that looted Nigeria dry. He built something too, and that matters. The Nigeria you see on a map today divided into 6 geopolitical zones: North Central, Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, South-South, and Southwest. That is Abacha. He created 6 new states, bringing the total from 30 to the 36 states Nigeria has today. And the 6-zone system, designed to reflect the country's cultural, economic, and political realities, is still the framework Nigeria uses to distribute power, allocate resources, and settle the endless debates about who gets what. It is imperfect, it is contested, but it survived him.
This government has always expressed its commitment to dialogue as a means of resolving our internal differences. We have demonstrated this by our individual and collective efforts at holding consultation at all strata of our society.
In 2017, Amnesty International published a devastating report based on thousands of pages of internal corporate documents disclosed through legal proceedings, and they completely rewrote the history of the Niger Delta. These were the private internal memos of Shell. Throughout the 1990s, the world looked at Shell as just a bystander, a massive energy company caught in the middle of a brutal military dictatorship. But the chair of Shell in Nigeria, a man named Brian Anderson, his private memos told a very different story. Anderson didn't just have the phone number for Sani Abacha's office. He had the dictator's 2 private home phone lines. In one of these memos, Anderson literally wrote that it was, quote, important that we are seen by him to be assisting the state by giving him the requisite intelligence as it comes to us. Shell wasn't just drilling for oil, they were actively acting as a field intelligence arm for a military dictator. On April 30th, 1994, Anderson sits down with Abacha to specifically discuss what he calls the problem of the Ogonis and Ken Saro-Wiwa. After the meeting, Anderson reports back to his team that he expects Abacha to intervene with either the military or the police. Less than a month later, Ken Saro-Wiwa is arrested, and as the military rolls into Ogoni land, Shell provides a lot more than just intelligence. A confidential Shell memo reveals that the company made a direct payment to the commander of the Internal Security Task Force, the exact military unit responsible for the violent raids on the villages. The memo describes this money as an honorarium to the very soldiers carrying out this crackdown. By July, the Dutch ambassador personally warns Shell executives that the Nigerian army has already killed roughly 800 Ogoni people. But Shell doesn't pull back. They ask the military for even more security. Anderson even notes in his memos that he is in constant contact with a British Secret Service representative in Lagos who has agreed to keep me informed of any developments that might be of interest to Shell. But the absolute most damning evidence in the entire cache came from the trial of the Ogoni 9. 2 of the key witnesses who testified against Ken Saro-Wiwa later confessed the truth. They had been bribed. They were offered cash and jobs at Shell to sit in front of the judge and say exactly what the military wanted them to say. Documents reviewed by Amnesty International show that Shell knew it was highly likely that Saro-Wiwa would be found guilty and executed. But still, it continued to discuss ways to deal with the Ogoni problem with the government. And so, a quiet message was sent to Saro-Wiwa's family. The offer was this: Shell would use its massive influence to try to save his life, but only if he softened his stance and officially told his people to stop protesting. Ken Saro-Wiwa chose the rope instead. We are back in October 1995. Sani Abacha looks at the camera and makes a massive promise. He announces a 3-year transition program. He even gives a specific date, October 1st, 1998. On that day, he promises Nigeria will completely return to civilian rule. The government registers 5 new political parties: the United Nigeria Congress Party, the Congress for National Consensus, the National Center Party of Nigeria, the Democratic Party of Nigeria, and the Grassroots Democratic Movement. But the military gets to decide who is actually eligible to run. Every single party that actually opposes the regime is immediately disqualified. Every single applicant with a spine is entirely excluded. The conventions are supervised by the regime's own operatives. They are the architects building it. By April 1998, the mask of democracy slips entirely. The 5 political parties hold their big public presidential conventions to announce their candidates for the upcoming election. The first party nominates Sani Abacha. The second party nominates Sani Abacha. The third party nominates Sani Abacha. The fourth party nominates Sani Abacha. The fifth party nominates Sani Abacha.
We believe there should be a civilian transition in Nigeria, a transition that allows for a genuine democratic process, including allowing opposition parties to operate, allowing the media to cover the work of opposition parties, and allowing the transition that General Abacha promised to take place.
5 supposedly independent political parties, 1 single candidate. The international community watches this happen with a wild mix of horror and total pragmatism. In the US, Susan Rice comes out and sounds tough. She declares that an election victory by any military candidate would be unacceptable. But just weeks later, during his Africa tour, US President Bill Clinton completely softens the blow. The signal from Washington becomes clear. The West is entirely willing to live with a brutal dictator, just as long as he agrees to change his uniform. It is now May 1998. Sani Abacha is now 54 days away from becoming a civilian president. He has 0 opposition on the ballot. His rivals are either dead, living in exile, or terrified into silence. Even his own backyard is starting to smoke. Prominent northern politicians risk absolutely everything to formally oppose his plan to succeed himself. Some are promptly arrested, others sent memoranda practically begging him to stop. Abacha doesn't even bother to reply. By now, the dictator is essentially a ghost. He hasn't been seen in public for months. He's a man who rules a nation of millions entirely through a telephone and a hit squad. And in a dark cell somewhere sits MKO Abiola in total isolation. The election is now less than 2 months away. Abiola is not a candidate. He is barely a memory in the state-controlled press. Here is the actual winner of the last election, rotting in the dark, while the man who stole it prepares to be formally voted into power. And then, on the morning of June 8, 1998, something happens. Sunday, June 7, 1998, General Sani Abacha is at Abuja's International Airport. He's seeing up the president of the Palestinian National Authority, Yasser Arafat. It looks like a completely standard diplomatic goodbye, but Abacha's chief security officer, a man named Al-Mustafa, is watching closely. Years later, Al-Mustafa will tell a deeply strange story about this exact moment. He will claim that as one of the security operatives in Arafat's delegation shook the general's hand, Abacha's face suddenly changed. The theory was that a deadly contact poison was delivered through a simple handshake. There is absolutely no physical evidence for this, but in the deeply paranoid world of Nigerian intelligence, it becomes this permanent, lingering shadow over everything that happens next. As the sun sets, the general's family goes to sleep, but Abacha does not. He is a creature of the night. For nearly 5 years, he has run a nation of 120 million people almost entirely from midnight to dawn. He moves over to a highly secure private guest lodge inside the presidential complex. He arrives just as Monday begins. According to multiple international reports, the night is not a quiet one. It allegedly involves high-ranking political allies. But then, in the very early hours of the morning, something tragic happens. Around 5 a.m., Al-Mustafa is jolted awake with the news that the head of state is dangerously unstable. He races to the guest house. When he reaches Abacha's bedside, the general is already gasping. Al-Mustafa immediately calls the personal physician, Dr. Sadiq Wali, who arrives within 8 minutes. There are no women, there is no party, there is only a man still in his work clothes, foaming at the mouth. Dr. Wali attempts desperately to resuscitate him. He administers 2 injections, one directly to the heart, another near the neck. He tries absolutely everything modern medicine allows. But it is too late. The general has already turned ice cold. On the morning of June 8, 1998, Sani Abacha is dead. There is no autopsy. The family declines, insisting on an immediate Islamic burial. There is no massive state funeral either. In strict accordance with tradition, his body is immediately flown north to Kano and put in the ground before the sun even sets. Whatever physical evidence existed of what actually happened in that room, whether it was a sudden heart attack or a poisoned apple or something else entirely, is buried right alongside him. The journalist Karl Mayer will later give this moment a name that permanently sticks in the history books. He calls it a call from heaven. But back in the dark cell, there is one man who has been waiting for 3 years, 11 months, and 16 days. The man whose stolen presidency started this entire nightmare. MKO Abiola is still alive. Exactly 29 days have passed since Sani Abacha's heart stopped beating. A high-level diplomatic delegation from the United States has just been granted a meeting with MKO Abiola. They are there to negotiate the endgame, to finally bring the man who won the 1993 election out of the shadows and into the sunlight of a new democratic Nigeria. The delegation is made up of heavy hitters. You have the Undersecretary of State, Thomas Pickering, and a young rising Assistant Secretary named Susan Rice. According to both their accounts, when Abiola walks into the guest house at 3 p.m., he looks robust. He's happy to see them. After 4 years trapped in isolation, he looks like a man who is finally ready to claim his life back. He sits down on the couch and immediately begins telling them about how poorly he has been treated in prison. Rice notices that his ankles are swollen. On the table between them, a tea service is sitting untouched. 5 minutes into the conversation, the entire energy in the room shifts. Abiola begins to cough. At first, it's just mild and intermittent, but within seconds, it turns into a racking, deep, consistent